Hello, it's Thursday the 17th of April. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast here on Arirang TV. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. A major rescue operation is continuing off Korea's southwestern coast after a ferry carrying 475 people capsized. 7 people have been confirmed dead, but 289 others, including many high school students, remain unaccounted for. Korea and Japan agreed to hold regular working-level talks on the Japanese military sexual enslavement of Korean women during World War II. The two sides will meet again in May. Plus, NATO vows to toughen its military presence in Eastern Europe in response to Russian aggression in Ukraine. A major rescue operation is continuing off Korea's southwestern coast on this Thursday morning, some 24 hours after a Korean passenger ferry carrying 475 people capsized. 7 people have now been confirmed dead, but 289 others remain unaccounted for. Most on board the Sewol ferry were teenagers, high school students heading to Korea's southern Jeju Island for a field trip. We're going to connect live to our Kim Ji-yeon at the news centre for the latest now. Ji-yeon, hundreds remain missing despite the frantic, now day-long search and rescue operation.
Mark, it really is an agonizing wait for the families of the missing who are sick with worry. Search and rescue teams have resumed operations this morning, but efforts are being hampered by rain along the coast near Jindo Island, and strong sea currents are making efforts to try and locate the missing that much more difficult. The part of the sea in which the ship sank is reported to be at least 30 meters deep and filled with boulders and rocks. Local media outlets in Seoul say the water temperature is low, and experts have said even 2 hours of exposure to the cold waters can be life-threatening. At least 7 people, although there are conflicting reports, at least 7 people are confirmed dead so far. The number of people rescued stands at 179, with less than 290 people, mostly teenage students, are still missing.
Yes, Jion, the entire nation is in a state of shock today about this disaster, and a series of text messages appeared in national media, and they show the confusion and just the sheer terror of those on board, the feelings they were feeling at the time.
Mark, these messages are drawing the nation's hearts toward the victims and the victims' families. Some of the texts describe the state of the ferry, saying the ferry looks like it's really going to capsize. And there were others that wanted to reach out to their families and say what could be their final words. It reads, "Mom, just in case I can't see you again, I just wanted to say that I love you." These were one of the texts from one of the many high school students that were on board heading to their destinations for their field trip. A majority of the passengers were students. 325 students and 14 teachers were on the ferry. Local authorities here have confirmed that some of the messages from the missing were received around midnight last night. These messages said they were alive, but we must note that there's a strong possibility that these messages were sent earlier than that and were delivered late due to heavy data.
Yes, Jion, we were just seeing some of those messages there, very harrowing indeed. Can't even imagine how the parents must be feeling, waiting for news about their son or daughter. Now, the government response, how the authorities and the government responded to this disaster?
Well, the Korean government is making all-out efforts to save any possible survivors. Just an hour ago, the country's security minister Kang Byung-gu says all related government ministries will coordinate their response to boost search and relief efforts for the victims and the victims' families. President Park Geun-hye and Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin had earlier ordered that all Navy, Coast Guard, and nearby vessels will help the efforts. Dozens of ships, aircraft, along with hundreds of specialized forces and professional divers are actively searching for survivors. The U.S. Navy also sent a ship with helicopters on board to join the operation.
And mystery surrounds what might have caused this capsize. There's lots of speculation flying around, one that the ferry might have hit a submerged reef or some rocks, or it may have made a swift turn for some reason.
Well, although the focus remains on the rescue operations, there are only speculation at this point about what have caused the ferry to sink. The Coast Guard has released provisional findings. They say there was an abrupt change in the ship's direction, and this would have caused the ship to sink. Due to this, the ferry's cargo may have shifted, causing the 180 vehicles and 1,000 tons of cargo to shift to one side, ultimately leading to the ship to capsizing very quickly. But this is a provisional finding and is currently under investigation, and there are other causes that may have contributed to the incidents. Well, survivors said that they heard a loud bang right before the ferry started to go down. And since there are clusters of big rocks and boulders at the site where the ferry sunk, it is presumed the ferry hit a boulder and started to tilt. Many were trapped inside the ferry and couldn't get free, as some say they were told to stay put rather than escaping the ferry, which is not comprehensible for many here in Korea. There are also some finger pointing to the company in charge of the ferry, saying that there were only one captain in charge of the ferry since the main captain was on a leave on that unfortunate day. Normally, there are two people, one captain and a sub-captain. And on that day, the sub-captain, who has 8 years of experience of steering ships, was on charge of the ferry. Only identified by surname Lee, the sub-captain, and 2 other crew members that are currently under investigation by authorities are looking to see whether they follow safety regulations and guidelines to help passengers reach safety. I'll bring more updates later today.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ji-yeon. That was our Kim Ji-yeon reporting on the sinking of a Korean ferry off the country's southwestern coast. Now for a quick recap of the current situation. What we know right now is that 289 people are still missing, and the number of confirmed dead has risen in the last couple of hours to 7. 179 people were rescued on Wednesday. This after the Sewol ferry started to sink sometime around 9 a.m. Wednesday morning local time, Korea time, some 20 kilometers off the coast of Jindo Island, which is in southwestern Korea. The confirmed dead include a female ferry employee in her 20s, 4 high school students, and 2 others who have not yet been identified. Now, the 6,800-ton ferry sank in the space of 2 hours, 20 minutes from the moment it began to tilt in the water. For an expert's analysis on the sinking, we are joined on the phone by Professor Kim Kwang-soo at Mokpo National Maritime University's Division of Maritime Transportation Systems. Professor, firstly, as we just heard, there's a lot of speculation flying around. But what, in your opinion, might have caused the ferry to sink?
It is controversial to say what is the cause of the accident now. It is too early to conclude the cause of the accident because the accident is under inspection and the outcome of inspection is not produced yet. However, the possibility of touch or collision with a sunken log is now supposed. There is a possibility of the ship's deviation from the intended coastline of route because of a strong tidal current. On the other hand, no evidence of defect of ship's structure has been found, even if a Ro-Ro passenger ship Sewol is 20 years old.
Yes, the Sewol ferry was about 20 years old, built in Japan, and the time frame in which the ferry sank was about 2 hours, as I just said. Is it common for a vessel of this size to go down so quickly?
Unexpectedly, the ship began to filled with water and sank in 2 hours. 2 hours are thought to be a very short time in capsizing the passenger ships. Probably, we guess, while the ship was damaged and flooded and then listed to port side. The vehicles and cargo containers which were loaded and stored on board the ship were supposed to move to a port side rapidly, and then the list of the ship to port side might be more increased. After all, the ship was capsized quickly due to the loss of ship's stability. But I don't know the condition of serious ballast on board the ship.
Well, we can see on the video there that the seas looked rather calm. There weren't lots of rough waves there, but we're led to believe that the area where the ship sank is notorious for its rough and very powerful undercurrents. Could you give us some more details about this region?
Yeah, passenger ship Sewol was sunk in waters of a Mango Channel, which is located between Mango Island and Jeju Island in southwestern coastal area of Korea, and is noted for strong tidal current in Korea. The maximum tidal current in Mango Channel is about 4 knots. Because Mango Channel is a passage of a main route from West Sea to South Sea in Korea, and its depth of water is over 30 meters. This channel is mostly used by passenger ships and large-sized vessels.
Yes, so there are concerns that those strong currents may be hampering the search efforts. And weather forecasts for the area around Jindo Island suggest low visibility, strong wind and rain today, which could make it even more difficult for rescue teams. Do you expect authorities to find any survivors?
Yeah, it is very difficult to quantify the possibility of survival and rescue. Unfortunately, bad weather is now forecasted. It will make search and rescue operation more difficult. It is most regrettable that there is not much possibility of survival and rescue of missing persons. It is so miserable, terrible thing.
Yes, Professor, you're certainly right. An extremely sad day for the whole of Korea. Well, thank you ever so much for your time, Professor. We await some good news from this truly horrific and heartbreaking incident. That was Professor Kim Kwang-soo of the Mokpo National Maritime University offering his insights on the Sewol ferry sinking.
Thank you.
Now, it's been a day of quiet reflection at Korea's National Assembly on this Thursday as lawmakers expressed their deep sorrow at the worst maritime disaster Korea has seen in more than 2 decades. Ruling Saenuri Party lawmakers conveyed their deepest condolences to the families of those who died and the 289 still unaccounted for. Saenuri Party Chairman Hwang Woo-yeol said Parliament has activated a disaster relief committee to lend support to the site. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy also said the first priority was saving more lives and promised the party would do all that it can to help. As a mark of respect, both parties say they will stop all local election campaigning until further notice.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. Arirang News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. Korea and Japan have held their first working-level talks solely focused on the Japanese military's sexual enslavement of Korean women during World War II. The two sides met in Seoul late Wednesday to try and resolve their deep differences. But, as our Hwang Sang-hee tells us, it will take much more than one meeting to mend decades of soured ties.
Senior officials from Korea and Japan met in Seoul Wednesday as they seek to resolve the long-standing dispute over Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Following 2 hours of talks, a South Korean official who wished to remain anonymous told reporters that the two sides exchanged their basic stances and held a productive discussion. Korea has been demanding an official apology and legal compensation from Japan for the so-called comfort women. Tokyo claims the issue was settled through a 1965 treaty signed by the two neighbors when they normalized diplomatic ties. The rare meeting is the result of an agreement reached ahead of President Park Geun-hye's first official talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in the Netherlands last month. But just one round of talks was not enough for the two sides to overcome decades of diplomatic tensions. The officials will meet again in May, when Japan hosts a second round of discussions on the comfort women issue, and perhaps even more.
I believe there are many issues that Korea and Japan need to exchange views on.
Around 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese army in comfort stations during the early 20th century. When asked whether the officials will discuss a possible summit between South Korea and Japan at their next meeting, the South Korean official did not give a clear answer, but said that the two sides must first build mutual trust. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
While Korea and Japan were holding talks on the sexual slavery issue, the surviving victims demanded justice outside the Japanese embassy in Seoul, just as they've been doing each and every Wednesday since 1992. Yulian went to the scene and filed this report.
Shouts ring out, calling on Japan to atone for its sexual enslavement of women during World War II. Every Wednesday for the past 22 years, victims of the atrocities carried out by Japan relive their painful past here in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul. Ahead of the first ever governmental meeting between Korea and Japan on the issue of so-called comfort women, a euphemism for sex slaves, the victims were cautiously optimistic.
All we want is the Japanese government to recognize its wrongdoings, apologize, and provide legal compensation. But we will have to wait to see what they really have in mind.
Civic leaders were concerned that the meeting was simply a show put on by the Japanese government, wary about its strained relationship with the United States in recent months.
We will have to see if the Japanese government came to seek resolution or only came because of pressure from Washington ahead of President Obama's visit to Japan and Korea next week. I hope it's the former.
With hopes running high, the former comfort women were joined by supporters at the rally.
Even the idea of using comfort women is unacceptable. That is the universal opinion. I plead as a Japanese citizen that Japan apologize and make sure such things never happen again.
The South Korean government should not give a lukewarm response, but rather make strong demands on behalf of these comfort women.
Only 55 Korean women identified as former sex slaves remain alive today. But the doors to the Japanese embassy remain closed to their calls for justice. The ignorance of the Japanese government is becoming ever harder to bear for the victims who have grown frail from decades of waiting. Time is running out. Yurian, Arirang News.
Over at the National Assembly, lawmakers have passed Korea's long-awaited defense cost-sharing pact with the United States. Meanwhile, over in Washington, high-level officials from the two countries discussed the timing of the U.S. handing over the wartime operational control to Seoul. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
The ruling and opposition parties came together to pass a number of long-pending bills this Wednesday at the National Assembly. After months of gridlock, lawmakers passed the revised Defense Cost-Sharing Pact with the U.S. Seoul and Washington had agreed in January to renew the Special Measures Agreement that lays out the cost each side pays for the 28,500 U.S. troops stationed on South Korean soil. Under the deal, South Korea will pay some $880 million annually from this year through 2018, a 5.8% increase from its share last year. Approval of the pact was delayed over concerns that it requires Seoul to pay more than is necessary. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy had expressed the most concern, wondering aloud whether Washington would divert some of Seoul's share of the money to finance the relocation of a U.S. military base in the country. The ratified bill will go into effect after being signed by President Park Geun-hye. Over in Washington, South Korea and the U.S. opened a high-level military meeting at the Pentagon on Tuesday local time, with North Korea and pending alliance issues topping the agenda. The two-day integrated defense dialogue began with Seoul requesting for another delay in the transfer of wartime operational control from the U.S. to South Korea. Seoul is currently scheduled to regain wartime operational control in 2015, but the government says the nation's military needs more time to prepare for the transfer. The two sides have reportedly agreed in principle on a delay due to the ongoing threat posed by North Korea, but the exact timing and other details are still being ironed out. The two allies will sit down with Japan for defense trilateral talks starting Thursday. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Korea's producer price index fell for the 18th consecutive month in March by 0.5% compared to the same period last year. The Bank of Korea attributed a drop in oil prices and raw materials to the decline, along with the local currency's gains against the greenback. A central bank official, however, said that because the prices of livestock products and services between consumers and businesses had risen, consumers probably won't feel as though prices in general have actually fallen. The prices of water, gas and electricity rose 5.5% year over year, while services, including education and transportation, went up by 1.3%. Time now for a look through the international headlines this morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre. Good morning, Eunice. Now, tensions continue to mount in Ukraine as top diplomats from the East and West converge in Geneva on this Thursday for an important meeting.
That's right, Mark. Foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia, flanked by those of the EU and the U.S., will gather in one room to hash out their disagreements on this Thursday. They are arriving as we speak in Geneva. Ukraine's foreign minister is saying there is still time for a diplomatic solution, though U.S. officials in Washington were less optimistic, saying they don't expect a breakthrough and more sanctions on Russia is likely to follow. And on the eve of this four-way meeting, pro-Russian separatists overtook 6 Ukrainian armored personnel carriers and were seen entering the rebel-held town of Sloviansk with Russian flags topping them to crowds chanting "Russia, Russia." Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen has promised to bolster its military presence in Eastern Europe in a posture of defense, deterrence, and de-escalation. Nigerian military are saying all but 8 of the 129 schoolgirls abducted by armed Boko Haram militants Monday night have been freed, a claim that is yet to be confirmed. The military has been canvassing deep forests near the remote northeastern town of Chibok that extends to neighboring Cameroon with the help of surveillance helicopters and volunteers. They're trying to locate and safely bring back home the teenage girls abducted in their sleep Monday night by heavily armed Boko Haram gunmen who herded them into trucks, vans, and buses after engaging in a firefight with soldiers guarding the school. And in France, police are finishing the last of a massive DNA test, taking samples from hundreds of students and staff of a school in western France in search of a rapist. A 16-year-old girl was raped in a dark bathroom in a private secondary school in La Rochelle last September, and police had been searching for a DNA match to an imprint found on her clothing. Detectives say only one student has refused to give a sample, citing personal reasons. Some 475 male students, 31 teachers, and 21 other male adults at the secondary school are reported to have taken part. Mideast talks scheduled for Wednesday evening were postponed after a high-ranking Israeli intelligence officer was killed in the West Bank earlier this week. Israel did not give a reason for the delay, but Tuesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had condemned Palestinian leaders for continuing to, quote, peddle hate-filled material. A spokesman for Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said the meeting had been rescheduled for Thursday.
Well, let's get started by giving you a weather update in Jindo. As Mark said earlier, it doesn't look too good today. Heavy showers are expected in that area of up to 40 millimeters, along with strong wind and thunderstorms. And that rain could be moderate to heavy at times through the day. And the waves are expected to reach 1 to 2 meters high, with water temperatures ranging between 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. And other southern provinces will also receive receive heavy showers, while Seoul and the surrounding areas will just have a brief period of rain with less than 5 millimeters. And this band of rain will drag down the temperatures, mainly regions in the south, 7 to 8 degrees lower than yesterday, but similar afternoon highs are expected in the Seoul metro area. But also please note that the level of dust particles will remain moderately high in the capital areas. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. The afternoon high in the capital will rise to 22, while highs in Daegu and Gwangju will soar to 20 and 17 respectively, and Busan should top out at 18 later in the afternoon. Now for other regions, it looks like down on Jeju will reach to 21, Daejeon peak at 19, while Mount Kumgang should see a high of 10 this afternoon. Well, that's all for now, and I'll be back with more updates afternoon.
Thank you, Ji-yeon. And we'll be back at 11 a.m. Korea time. That's in about half an hour's time. We'll have the latest updates and hopefully some good news on this tragic ferry disaster that occurred in waters off the southwestern coast of Korea. Until then, goodbye.